So the next image we're going to work on is going to build on what you've learned. And it's going to upgrade some of those techniques and systems in really, really cool ways. On this one, we need to extract the hair from the background and add a new background color in. So some of those painting techniques that you learned by hand, which is like the basic way to do them, we're going to take those and create some twists by creating brushes and some new ways to use those techniques to create new hair detail and make the hair look better. So let's take a look at this image and identify the things we need to change, extract, and refine. Great, so let's zoom into this image. Got all my toolbars off so we can just look exactly, just totally pay attention to what we've got to deal with here. Now, right off the bat, you might be thinking to yourself, this is a great candidate for a channel pull. There's a ton of contrast between the model and the background, so I immediately think channel pull when I see that. The quality of the hair, there's a ton of crosshairs in here. Her hair's got a really beautiful sort of geometry to it and contour, but the hair itself is really, really thick and coarse. So it's got a lot of textural detail in there. And the edge is varying in focus, so some parts are out of focus, some parts are a little bit more in focus, so we need to really pay attention to that. She's also got eyelashes that are clumping up a bit, and yeah, it looks like a lot of hair cleanup work to do, and we'll need to find a method to extract the edge so that we can get a nice natural edge. Okay, first thing that I want to do is take sort of an overall look at the hair. And in these cases, I'm going to work the macro to the micro. Now, the macro concern here is the overall shape of the silhouette of the hair, and I think we can make some improvements there. And the way that I do that is in Liquify. So once in Liquify, I'm looking at all the contour, of the silhouette of the hair, and I want to make some improvements in that. If you'll remember, that's one of the things I like to say is that we just make incremental steps towards improvement. And I'm not too picky about the settings here. I just mess with them until I get something that moves right. And you can just experiment with that. But if you use these settings here, that'll serve you well for this image. So I'm just taking some of these bumps out of the hair and just trying to refine that edge a little bit. Streamline it. You don't need to make it super uniform because we want to keep a little bit of life there. So you remember in the first image that I decided to do Liquify right at the end because I changed my mind about how the shape of the hair looked. As a rule of thumb, always try to do your Liquify right up front because once we do the extraction, you're going to be extracting the image based on the shape and the silhouette that's present there. So to change that afterwards, I've showed you a way to do it. It's not ideal. It's late. So just try to get the silhouette and all the forms together before you do your extraction because you're going to be extracting based on that pixel layout. So I'm going to tuck this in a bit here. Now, how am I making these decisions? Why am I doing this? Now, I'm really just sort of using my compositional aesthetic for these sorts of things. See if we can turn preview on and off. I mean, you can see that this is a simplified form, and simplified forms read just much better and faster if there's less distractions to the silhouette of the shape. We don't have to pay attention to those things and be distracted by them. I'm also looking at creating pleasing compositional lines. The way that I look at an image is that there are lines in it. These diagonal shapes are created. They're dictated by the forms and the geometry that are present in the larger shapes and volumes, lines that are in the image. So just toy with those, and you'll be surprised that the type of improvements that you can make in the overall image as a design, basically. Thinking of it in abstract shapes and forms and manipulating those at this stage is a really, really good idea to do, because you're just creating a more pleasing and engaging geometric structure within the image itself. I'm just looking to create like some more pleasing, rounded shapes in the hair. Great. So you can see back and forth, there's a pretty good improvement there to the geometry and the flow of the hair element. I'm going to click OK. So let's now take a look at a channel pull, because I just want to get right into it. I've already created a path here, just so you don't have to watch me clip a path. And it basically follows the edge of the model in the areas of the skin. And notice that I've clipped just inside the model, because I know this is going to be an extraction. So I really want to avoid creating any white halos, because I know I'm planning to do a darker color. I don't want her on white anymore. And when it comes up to the hair, I've clipped inside the hair, and actually this is kind of in the wrong place. I'm going to bring that inside the hair silhouette, because you know, you probably know by now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a channel pull to extract the edge detail and create a mask based on that. So the mask edge that I'm creating with the clipping path is fine on the skin. I'm going to turn that into a selection and set that as a mask. And I'm going to eyeball the color that I want. Which I just chose for this example using a somewhat analogous skin tone in the background, which is basically a muted orange, which blends with her skin. So we've got basically an analogous color scheme here, and the pop color a little bit is the redder lipstick, which is a little bit further on the color wheel towards red, which gives us a slight pop, but it's a very subdued analogous color scheme for this image. And we can now take a look at what that edge looks like. So of course, yeah, it looks cut out around the hair. If we go into the skin, we can see that there are a couple edges here. I'm gonna fix that. Eyelashes are cut off. Just for viewing's sake, I really don't mind adding a little bit of softness to that edge, even 1 pixel. So I may have to take that off later, but it just makes it easier for me to believe the knockout at this stage. So I need to take a look into the channels, see if I can pull something useful to create that hair edge. So in the channels palette, I just turned off my mask so I can see the whole thing, because I want to go back to the base image to get to that information so I can extract it. So in the channels, let's take a look. There's the RGB, red, green, blue. There is really no difference along this hair edge in the different channels. Very, very little. It's completely unimportant which one you use because of the darkness of the hair compared to the background. So I'll just duplicate the red channel. I'm going to bring up a curve. Now, of course, the curve is used to create that contrast that we need in order to extract a mask. I always put that sample point out there on the white so I can just see what the values are that we're dealing with. I have my info palette down here set to K, which is basically just showing density. If there's any dot there, right here, see there's actually, it looks white, but there's actually 24% of value in there. Whether that's, gray or a color, all you need to know is that there's something in there. So watch as I crank the white point, that starts to drop. We'd ideally like that to get to 0, but watch the hair edge as you do that. Make sure it doesn't chew into the hair edge, because you want to preserve as much information there. We'll use those tools, dodge and burn, to tidy anything up that we need to be a little bit more careful about. Think of this in terms of the macro to the micro as well, because in this case, the curve is the more blunt hammer. And once we go into our fine tuning tools, if we need to, it's going to be the dodge and burn tool, which you can remember again, to me, dodge and burn tools are mask tools. They're always used on masks. Never used on pixel information because they're destructive. They're super useful for working on masks. So I'm going to bring the black point up so I can get that hair to go pretty much to black. So I'm looking at the densest, the most dense areas of hair. Not really up here because this is lighter. I'm going to deal with that later. I just don't want to push this too far. So if I'm looking up here on the mask, on the, the hair, the dark area that will eventually become a mask, if I crank that down to black, then I've sacrificed some information along the edge by plugging that up a little bit too much. So I would want to bring the darkest points to black and then deal with the areas that are a little bit gray later. Check along the edge, see how it looks. You can do preview on and off, and it looks like it's still preserving a lot of that detail along the edge, which is what we always want to do. Click OK. We're still working on the red channel. Oops. I'm going to go into my burn tool. Exposure is really low. Let's see if that works. And we want to be targeting the shadows, right? Remember, dodge and burn, they're just curves on a brush. They're a brush that is made of a curve. And what do I mean by that? Once again, this is the way I think of it. It's a curve that darkens. The reason I call it a curve is because curves, you are able to target certain tonal areas to only darken those. So this brush has that wonderful added benefit of only targeting shadows. Now, that means that the highlights are totally preserved when I set it to that. See, I can darken the highlights if I set it to highlights, and I don't want to do that. So that's a really excellent control on this burn brush. Now, that's in contrast to using some other methods like painting on a 50% gray layer, for instance, or painting with a brush set to like overlay or something like that and set it to white. Those don't have the same level of control that that using dodge and burn do. They're specifically set up for this and makes them superior to those other tools that you might see other retouchers using on YouTube or other tutorials. I highly recommend getting comfortable with these as your mask adjustment tools because they're super powerful. So let's go and clean up the rest of this image edge. Make sure I'm set to shadows. You can even crank the exposure up for stuff like this. I mean, I'll even go as high as 50%. It just gets me quick results, you know? So it just happens really fast. It's really good. I see a lot of people go through and mask out like the rest of the image so they have all black in here. You don't really have to do that step. So just make it easier on yourself. All we care about is the edge because we're gonna just add it to the mask that we've already created. So I'm gonna invert this channel because I'm done tweaking it. And you can see now, this is what our mask is gonna look like. Let's see how it goes. So I set it as a selection by command clicking on it, go into layers, activate the mask again. I'm gonna hide my selection. Now I just want to bring up my regular brush, make sure everything's set to 100, and make sure I'm set to white. I'm going to pull my smoothing down because I don't need any smoothing right here. And let's just create our hair edge. Be a little bit more careful as I get towards the forehead. Cool, mask edge complete. I'm going to group this, drag that mask up to the top of the group because I want to work within the group. I'm going to name it model. And inside here for a quick defringe pass, I'm just going to bring up a new layer. Double click on it. And I'm just going to start sampling in here, set my opacity down low to like 4, and you can get away with so much defringing on an image like this that we just want to fill in any of those areas there where white is punching through. Great, so we've got our edge. Let's go in and inspect and evaluate. So for some applications, like web or maybe small size print, or if you're just doing some hobbyist work, this might be fine. But for commercial retouching work, for high level work, that doesn't cut it. That hair edge looks like garbage. So why do I say that? Let's look along the edge here. Because of the fact that there was a bright background, it's really just chewing up the hair edge. Now, remember, hair catches light when it's shot through it from behind. And this is one of the results of that. You'll see that a lot, especially with outdoor backlit shots. So a lot of these tools that I've taught you for rebuilding the hair edge are going to come in super handy if you need to get something like that for really high-end work, high-end client work to a commercial standard. I'm going to show you how to do that. But first, I'm going to show you how I could have avoided this extra work that I now have to ditch. I don't want to mess with this mask edge. Once again, I want to create the edge I want, not the one that I'm given. So I'm going to turn off the fringe, and I'm going to go back to the file. Now that you've gone down that path and experienced getting a result that you're not happy with, it's important that you step back and go, okay, how could I have avoided that work by having that professional eye to know that that's not going to cut it. So we can see in the edge here, this is all just clumped up. There's a lot of little holes in here. Looks like, something chewed through the edge. And all of this hair is just soft, and that information in there isn't really useful to us at all. I've seen so many people on forums ask for help. And they're like, how can I get this hair extraction? It's just not happening. I think I'm not doing it right. And I always take a look and I zoom in and I go, well, look at the pixels that you're working with. The pixels you're working with are the pixels you have. There is not some magical plugin out there that's going to make the capture better so that you can get this perfect extraction. I've seen people get frustrated by that response that I have, and they go, well, I'm going to go ask somebody else because there's got to be a faster way to do this than actually rebuilding the edge. And I'm like, all right, have fun. Let me know how that goes, because I know it's not going to work. So the pixels you have are the pixels you have. If they look like garbage, they're garbage. So at that point, you can look closely at that and go, oh yeah, why would I waste all that time trying to deal with garbage pixels and somehow make them better? I'm going to make my own. So I'll show you a quick way to do that on this image that leverages that training that we've done of doing it by hand and creating a really cool automated brush that gives us even quicker results for a natural edge and flyaways. All right, just for the record, you don't have to start all the way from the beginning if you find yourself in this case, so don't worry about that. We're just gonna ditch that layer mask, and this is why we clip things, is because I have that in my library of clipping paths. I'm gonna modify this path just a little bit. I'm gonna duplicate it. And I'm just going to make it a little bit tighter up to the hair so I don't have so much building out to do. Bring it up pretty close. And remember, if you're not comfortable with using the pen tool, you can always use my two-pass technique, which involves setting points along the edge with no Bezier curves, and then going back, adding points to add the curve. Takes a ton of the hassle out of curves if you haven't practiced a lot with them. And actually many really good retouchers use this technique because it's just easier for their brains. Cool. So there's my closer path. I'm going to add that here. Now remember, since we're doing an extraction, in this case, any additional hair that we paint is eventually going to be used in the mask. It's not just going to be sitting on top as pixels, because I always want a very, very clean mask that includes all the information inside of it, not a mask for the model and then a bunch of pixel hair work sitting on top of it. That's not clean workflow. So I'll show you how to have completely clean workflow in this case. So I'm going to ditch this defringe layer. We don't need that. I'm going to bring up a layer above my model, and right now I'm going to show you how to build a custom brush to add close flyaway detail. It's really cool. It's not as complicated as it sounds. You can do it in a matter of minutes. It's super easy. So I'm going to change my brush. I'm going to be on the brush and sampling some hair. I'm going to ditch this sample point because it's distracting. And this is like my scratch pad up here. So I want to create a strand of hair that I think might be the right width. You'll remember I did this before. So that's too thick. And make sure the opacity is all the way up. I'm gonna go down a few steps. That's too thick. And make sure that we're on the soft round pressure size. Still too thick. I'm kind of looking at this hair here. You see that? Kind of want to get to that point. So let's try 3. That's looking good. All right, so I want to add detail kind of like this on the edge, because I want to keep it tight. So I don't want to paint all that right now because I just don't feel like it. So here's a technique that is very cool. I'm just going to create a brush that's kind of like that. And I'm going to bring up a marquee, hold down Shift, and just create a square behind it. I'm gonna fill that with white. Let's delete this extra stuff that's on here because I don't want that as part of my brush. It was on the same layer. So I have to go back to that square because I need a selection active. So don't hold down Command if you end up having to modify the brush stroke layer. Make sure you have a selection on, white square. I'm going to make sure this is centered in here by hitting V and just centering that. It's just nice to have your brush completely centered. And then do Edit, Define Brush Preset, and name that Hair Fly Base. Click OK. Magic. Now that's in your brush palette. And see, that's your brush. So check out what it does. Pretty cool. Now, it's way too uniform, but it looks like what we need. Let's just ditch all this stuff. That's just our scratch pad to build this. So what I need to do is add some modifiers to this brush, some of the brush dynamics. Shape dynamics, I want to turn up the size jitter just a bit. Basically what we're doing is just adding variation that looks natural. Angle jitter, only a touch of angle jitter. You see what happens there. Roundness jitter, maybe a bit too. Now you're gonna have to mess with this stuff to get a setting that's right for you. Let's just test it, huh? I think there's too much angle jitter, but wait, that's starting to look like hair, right? And it's magical. It just, we don't have to do a million strokes. It just does it for us. That's really cool. Let's check it out. I mean, that, you know, we know we can't use that, but, you know, as you now know from previous work, you know how to take something that's too perfect and actually make it look real now. And that's what we're going to do. A lot of, you can find some training out there on building these custom brushes. And usually the verdict is, this is really cool, but we can't use this. Let's do something else. So what I'm saying is that with the skills you now have, you can actually use this stuff. And I really encourage everybody watching this to go out and experiment with these types of things and surprise yourself, surprise me if you can figure out new ways to use these things, because I think that the applications are really, it looks really good for development in this area of finding different tweaks to brushes that just one little tweak is going to make it work where in the past it wouldn't. So really experiment with this, and I'm going to show you how we really make it work. I think there's a little bit too much angle jitter. I think the angle jitter mixed with the roundness jitters is like too much, because I just want a little bit of variation. Cool, that looks cool. I don't know about the little fish hook on the end of these things. We'll see how that goes. That might be a little bit distracting. You probably, if you're making your brush, look out for that. You probably don't want to capture one that has that little fish hook end. Now, very important point, we need to save this brush. Wait, actually, I want to check one more setting in scattering. I don't want it to scatter, but I want to see what it looks like with a count jitter, and you got to drag this all the way up. What that's going to do is just spit out different numbers of hair and just increase the variation a bit, which I think that's a good move. So let's do that. Let's capture this brush. Don't forget this step. We need to go in and say new brush preset, and I'm going to call it Hairfly Brush 01. Because if we don't do that, we change brushes, it's going to forget all those settings. And you can tell it to capture brush size and preset, so it'll always go to default to this size. See if that works for you. It works for me. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to select all, delete what we've done, and let's put this in action. We need to keep the brush settings palette open. I'm just going to set it over here, and you'll see why in just a second. So you can even change the size of this. And I'm just going to really carefully along the edge start doing this. Now, what I'm going to do is I need to go along the edge here. So I'm going to, this takes a little getting used to, but you need to just adjust it so it follows the edge of the shape you're trying to clean up. You know, and you want to have variation and make sure you don't get too uniform of an edge. Like I want stuff like you're seeing right there. So in that case, sometimes it's good to zoom out a bit. Now, let's go back to regular brush, soft round. I want it at 3 pixels. That's what we said. And I'm going to do a little bit of, you know what, I'm going to even make it smaller. I'll make it, let's see what 2 looks like. You know, and you know how to do this now. You know how to paint, so add a couple of extra details in there to make it look even more variation. Now, what's next? We need to find a way to apply this to our mask, because I don't want just black sitting up here. Set that as a selection. Take a look at our mask. I'm going to hide that and fill with white. Maybe I even fill with white twice. Looks good. Let's add a little bit of that fantastic Camera Raw grain. Zoom in. Once again, think of Camera Raw as a filter. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with it when applied as a smart filter. Not a lot of people know that. There's some grain. Let's bring the size down a bit. Roughness up a bit so it's a little bit softer. Hit OK. Now, oh, we got some fringing. You can deal with fringing a number of different ways. I'm going to try the easiest way, which is just on a lower opacity brush. I'm just going to paint. Oh, you know what I've been doing this whole time? This is a common error. Once you go into defringe, you didn't know it, but you had your selection on. So you really want to turn that off because it's constraining my defringing inside that selection, which is what I don't want. Let's hit Command D. Now see how it actually, because I was getting some detail inside the hair, not good. Okay, now we need to deal with the smoothness of the hair, because I think once again when we ran our camera raw filter, there we go. Did you see that change? Before, after, before, after. Adds a little bit of textural detail to the edge. When I ran the camera raw filter the first time, I did that common mistake of having the selection on. So what we need to do is compress that data just a bit, the edge data. And I'm going to hit Command click on my mask. I'm going to invert that, Command Shift I. I'm going to hide that. Let's see what happens when I fill this selection of the outside of this mask with black. Look at that. So it really compresses that information just in the same way that we compressed it before. This is just an alternate method. I'm going to do that again so you can see the exact steps that I use. Go to your mask, Command click to set that as a selection. You're selecting the inside of the model right now. You're selecting the white of this mask. What I want to do is Command Shift I to invert this. I'm going to hide my selection so I can see what's going on. And I'm going to fill with black, which is my background color, by hitting Command Delete. Boom. Compress the data in that same way that we did before, very similar. Looks like light's coming through the hair now. And let's add a bit of softness to the hair. And that softens it up just a touch to give it that realistic quality. That's a pretty natural hair mask. I think there's some more stuff that we can do inside the mask, like in this area here, to maybe make that look a little bit more natural. Some of the edges are a little bit sharp, which you can get away with using smudge tool a bit on areas that look too sharp. Kind of softening that up. And we could go through and do selective sharpening selective blurring, excuse me, where the hair kind of goes around. Oh, let's make sure to get that selection off again. Now that softness really creates a nice, natural looking edge. Now you can go back in and modify areas, massage little areas that need adjustment with like the smudge tool. There's a little bit of a hard edge there. Make sure your selection is off by hitting Command D. And we can really carefully go in. You can also paint directly on. It's hard to get that exactly using the HUD. You can also paint into the mask some more. To finesse those areas anywhere that you think could use it. You can even add another flyaway, but remember you got to defringe that. And additionally, I can do a little bit more compression of the information if I want to by going to my burn tool, set to shadows, and on the mask, if I burn that, see what happens? It goes away even more. So you've got this entire toolkit now to deal with hair edges. You can do these animated brushes to make the work go super fast. You can do it by hand to augment by adding extra stuff that looks real. And now you have this entire toolkit to distress the hair in a way that looks realistic. And that's always just the finishing touch that locks everything into place. Like I said before, working with hair, you have to have the confidence that the roadmap that you have works. And I hope that I've showed you that and given you that confidence, because when you start working on hair using a lot of these techniques, you look at it and you go, oh, this is not looking good. This is not real. It doesn't look right. It doesn't look right until right up to the end. And you do these distressing techniques and everything clicks into place. And then finally you're like, okay, it works. I've done that so many times trying to develop these methods. And now I use them every single time I do hair, and they always work. So if you practice them, they're always going to work for you too.